Hey, it's Rick Kettner here, and in this video, we're going to cover 6 of the very best marketing books. These are the books that you should read if you want to become a better marketer. And here on the channel, we have a number of different reading lists. So if you're interested in looking at the best business books, some of the best startup books, or even some great books on social media marketing, then I recommend that you check out some of the links in the description box down below. And of course, if you're interested in learning more about how to build and grow your business, then I recommend that you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on future videos. But with that said, let's dive into the list. The very first book here is Traction by Gabriel Weinberg and Justin Mayers. This is an absolute must-read for anybody that's launching a new business, a new product, or a new service. And the message here is so important because the number one reason why new businesses fail is they aren't able to attract enough customers. So this book covers 19 different traction channels that you can use to attract and convert customers to your business. And one really valuable framework that is included in this book, and there's actually a number of these, but the number one framework in this book that I actually refer to quite often on this channel is the bullseye framework. And this is a simple 4-step process that you can use to select and execute on the best marketing opportunities for your business. So for example, step 1 is to brainstorm marketing ideas based on the different marketing channels in this book. Step 2 is to select 3 to 5 of the most promising options. Step 3 is to perform inexpensive tests to find out which of those promising options is most promising. And then the 4th and final step is to commit to that one channel and to focus exclusively on it until you've reached diminishing returns, until you reach the point at which spending more money on that channel really isn't worth it, or spending more time trying to optimize the channel isn't worth it. And then you just simply restart the process and look for the next marketing opportunity to grow your business. So this is a book that I strongly recommend, especially if you're starting a new business, product, or service. But it's also great if you have an established business and you're interested in exploring additional marketing channels. So a really great read and one of the first books that I recommend you read. Next on the list is The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing by Reis and Jack Trout. This is one of my top 3 marketing books of all time. I often think of it as probably my number 1 marketing book of all time, but there are so many good ones out there, it's probably a little bit too limiting to commit to that. This book originally came out in 1994, so it's a bit of a classic, but much of the advice is as relevant today as it ever has been. And what I love most about this book, or I should say what it focuses most on, is positioning your business or your product or your brand. And the idea there is to try to make connections between the category or space that your product or your brand exists in and your actual brand. So for example, I'm going to list out some categories to kind of make this association work. If I was to say fast food, most people's brains would immediately go to McDonald's. Or if I was to say something like streaming television, most people would think of Netflix. Coffee shops, most people think of Starbucks. Electric cars, most people think of Tesla, even though they weren't necessarily first. They were the first to attract a mainstream audience. Ride sharing, Uber, the first brand that comes to mind. So the idea here, and this is just one of many things that they talk about in this book, the idea here is you want to own a category in the minds of your customers. So whatever space you're in, you want to be able to define that space and make sure that mainstream customers or the majority of customers in your space consider you the leader in that category and that they have a mental association between your brand and that category. Like I said, just like fast food, you immediately think McDonald's. And that is extremely valuable. You essentially live rent-free in the minds of customers when you're able to make this connection. Now, the second law in the book, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but the second law in the book addresses the number one question that most people have when they hear about this concept, and that is, what do you do if you're not number 1 in your category? What do you do if you're trying to create a fast food restaurant and McDonald's already owns the word? And what most people try to do is they try to compete directly. They try to win the category over, which is a losing strategy. You're never going to take the category from the leader unless they somehow mess up and they make a big mistake. The better strategy, and law number 2 of the book, is to create a new category, to redefine the space, to find some way to differentiate your category from the category that you were originally going to be approaching. So for example, a classic example would be Subway. They didn't try to compete head on with McDonald's. Instead, and I'm thinking like 10, 15 years ago when they were really at their peak, they instead focused on healthy fast food. They defined a new category, and whether you agree that their food is healthy or not is maybe up for debate, but they positioned themselves in a brand new category, and a lot of people, like I say, especially 10 or 15 years ago at their peak, would have linked them with that category. If you were to describe, hey, let's get some healthy fast food, Subway would have been one of the brands at the top of the list. So the idea here is you really want to focus on the perceptions of your brand, not just competing with other people and sitting somewhere third, fourth, or fifth in a random category. You want to position yourself as a leader so you get this mental link where customers think of your brand whenever they think of a specific category. And this book goes into so much more when it comes to positioning and other very important strategies when it comes to marketing. It's a relatively short read, and this is, like I said, one of my top 3 marketing books of all time. I strongly recommend that you take the time to go through this. It is a little bit older. Some of the examples in the book are a little bit older, but it's a really great read. Next on the list, Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. This is an absolute must-read when it comes to communicating who you are, what you do, and how you can help people. And this might seem really obvious, but most brands out there that I encounter, far too many at least, are way too subtle about what they do. And I think this is largely due to the fact that for most businesses, people that work there are really familiar with what they do, what they offer, what kinds of products and services that they have, and they just take for granted that the customer is going to understand all of that. And so you land on a website for a business like this, and either the language is too flowery or too technical, and it's just not even remotely clear what they do and exactly how they can help. This is an issue that is far too common. You come across a website or brochure and it's not clear what they can do to help you. And so this book is all about brand communication. It's about, what do they say here? Clarify your message so customers will listen. I strongly recommend this book. There are a lot out there on brand communication, probably dozens, if not hundreds of books on how to improve your messaging. But what I love most about this one is it uses a very simple formula, a very simple approach based on storytelling, based on the very common themes that you see in movies, TV shows, and even fiction books. And just it relays your business message and how you can help the customer in a pattern that is very familiar to them so they can immediately understand exactly who you are, what you do, and how you can help them. And not only is this important when it comes to building relationships with new customers, but it's also important when it comes to how customers relay your brand to other people that they know. So the easier it is for them to digest and understand what you do, the more likely it is that they're going to recommend you to somebody else when they hear a friend or family member that's having a problem that your company could address. So this is an extremely powerful book. If you haven't dabbled in the world of brand communication, or you've never really crafted your messaging to improve how customers understand it, then I strongly recommend that you read this book. It's just a really simple and great approach to communicating with customers more effectively. Next on the list is Contagious by Jonah Berger. Word of mouth is arguably the single most important marketing strategy for almost any product, service, brand, or even for content or other ideas. If you want to make whatever it is that you're creating more likely to spread, this book is all about the 6 principles of contagiousness. So the idea here is how do you make a product or service more likely to be recommended to somebody through word of mouth? And for a lot of people, the natural assumption is one of 2 things. First, they assume maybe I just need to make the absolute best product. If I make the best possible product, it's more likely to spread. And that's certainly true. That's going to be a factor. The other thing that a lot of people think is it just comes down to luck. When you see a viral runaway product or a viral hit on YouTube, a lot of people assume there's a lot of luck involved. And that too, especially for the extremely successful videos or extremely successful products out there, of course, luck is a factor. But this book really focuses on what you actually can control. And the 6 principles of contagiousness covered in the book, which include social currency, triggers, emotions, public observability, practical value, and stories. These principles are designed to basically increase the odds that whatever it is that you're creating is going to spread. So you can use any one of these ideas. You can use multiple together if it's appropriate for whatever you're building. But the idea here is to use these principles to make whatever it is that you're creating more likely to spread, more likely to benefit from word of mouth referral. And this is so important because not only does it help whatever it is that you're building spread to more people, but word of mouth is also more effective than almost any other form of marketing because each of those recommendations comes with trust and credibility from a close-knit relationship. So if I was to recommend something to a family member or to a friend, they're more likely to take that recommendation to heart than they are to see an advertisement online or see an article online and go out and buy whatever it is that was being recommended. So word of mouth is incredibly powerful, and this book covers 6 principles, 6 different approaches to making better use of word of mouth. So I strongly recommend it. Next book on the list is Influence by Robert Cialdini. This book is an absolute classic. It came out decades ago. It's arguably the most popular book in all of marketing, possibly in all of sales as well. And the ironic thing is this book was actually originally written as a guide to people on how to avoid being persuaded by aggressive salespeople. And so in many ways, it's kind of ironic. The book that became the most popular marketing book was designed to help protect people against marketers. Now, with that said, one really important point I want to make right up at the top is the way that many of the ideas in this book have been applied over the last few decades is aggressive, it's manipulative, and I strongly recommend against using them in that way for very important reasons. Number one, abusing these techniques, while that can definitely lead to short-term value, it's almost certainly going to harm your personal brand or your business brand in the long run. So I'm not recommending this book as a guide on how to manipulate people. In fact, quite the opposite. I think it's important to understand the ideas in this book to avoid being ignorant to them, to avoid running into situations where you're actually hurting your brand by simply not understanding the way that people think and understanding the way that people are persuaded. And so we're actually going to get to another book here in a second that builds on this, but an example of something you might actually take away from this book that's very positive, that is understanding something like social proof. Social proof is the idea that when people have a difficult decision or don't know how to act or behave, they typically look to people around them to see what others are doing, and they assume those people might know something they don't. So for example, if you drive past a restaurant and you look over and you see they're clearly open, but the parking lot is empty, that is sending a important signal to people that are driving past the restaurant because they see a lack of social proof. They're not seeing anybody else there. So they assume other people must know something that they don't, and people are avoiding that restaurant for some reason that you may just simply not know about. And so keeping this in mind, rather than abusing social proof and finding ways to manipulate people, you want to avoid situations where, like this, your parking lot is empty and nobody even thinks your restaurant is interesting, and so it stays empty. And really what you want to do is focus on things like a big product launch or focus on marketing up front to build momentum with your restaurant or whatever the situation might be. Read this book to understand core psychology when it comes to persuasion, and don't abuse the techniques, but simply understand their impact on everything that you're doing with your marketing. Again, if you abuse these techniques, you're going to pay a price in the long term. So as much as I'm sure some viewers are maybe trying to read between the lines and thinking, no, he's recommending that I abuse these techniques and he just doesn't want to say it. No, I genuinely believe if you abuse these techniques, it's going to be harmful to your business. But if you're ignorant to these techniques, it can be just as harmful when you're not able to account for certain things that might be sending very negative signals to your customers. So that's the idea here. And generally, if you want to become a marketer, or you're into marketing, you should probably read the single most popular book on this subject, if only to be familiar with the core ideas of the book. So another must read if you're interested in marketing. Next up on the list is The Language of Trust by Michael Maslansky. This is a very important follow-up to the last book. And even though Robert Cialdini, like I mentioned earlier, really the message of that book is to avoid persuasive techniques from the perspective of the customer. But this is an important follow-up because it really balances those ideas out by making clear that the number one priority, the most valuable asset that you have as a business is your personal or your business brand. And that comes down to the trust and credibility that you have with customers. So even though certain manipulative techniques or other kinds of marketing strategies might give you some advantage in the short run. The key idea behind this book is that ultimately, if you want to be successful in the long term, then you really need to double down on building and establishing trust and credibility. And one of the ideas from this book that really solidifies this is the importance of becoming an agent for the customer, to always be looking out for their best interests, even if that doesn't always match your own short-term goals. So one story I wanted to share, and actually a story that came up as I was reading this book that I remembered from probably 15 plus years ago. I had an opportunity to ride with my uncle in his Snap-on Tools pickup truck. He would make the rounds with his pickup van or truck, I guess you could say, where he had all of his products on display in there. You could order anything, and he would pull up to all the different mechanics and give them an opportunity to have their tools serviced or any maintenance or any warranty claims. And they could also come on the truck and actually just browse the different inventory and see if there's anything that they wanted to buy. So I was out with him this day. I wanted to see how the whole thing kind of worked. And I remember one customer came on the truck and he was browsing around and he had zeroed in on one specific tool that he was clearly very interested in. He asked my uncle a few questions about it, and to me, standing on the sidelines, it was painfully clear that he was just looking for any excuse whatsoever to buy this thing. It was he was trying to banter a little bit, trying to negotiate a little bit, but it was pretty clear he really wanted the tool, probably didn't want to wait a week until my uncle would be back out to that same shop again. And I was wondering why my uncle wasn't making a clear, strong effort to close the sale. And some of the ideas that were coming to my mind were, offering some kind of small discount, maybe creating some scarcity by suggesting if the tool got sold at the next mechanic place that we went, it might not be available next week, right? He might have to wait. Scarcity is one of the tools or one of the tactics from Influence by Robert Cialdini. And so I was thinking about these things. And I remember the guy ended up leaving. He didn't buy the tool. And I talked to my uncle, and I remember asking him, so why didn't you close that sale? It was really obvious that he wanted the tool, and you could have closed that sale. And it's funny, even as I'm describing this, so many YouTube sales gurus would be like, closing, you got to close that sale, always be closing. Well, I talked to my uncle about this, and he said, you know what? I'm going to be back to that same shop in a week, maybe less. I forget. I think he made the rounds pretty consistent, but he did visit different people. I'm going to be back there. And if that customer thinks I'm a pushy salesman, then all of the guys there are going to think I'm a pushy salesman. And that might spread to some of my other clients, especially if I treat them the same way. And at the end of the day, my reputation, my credibility, the way that they see me as a salesperson is far more valuable than any one sale. And the last thing I want to do is be seen as a pushy salesman with people that are long-term customers. They're people I'm going to be dealing with for years to come. And that was a really valuable lesson for me. It was probably at a time shortly after I'd read a book like that and was thinking of those kinds of tactics, like, hey, we got to close these sales. And that was a really valuable lesson. And it really speaks to the importance of a book like this. And like I said, I thought of that story and remembered it after reading this book, because the core message here is that your brand's trust and authority are the most valuable asset you have. And if you plan to be in business for a long time, then sacrificing that for some short-term gain is just not even remotely worth it. You want to always be an agent for the customer. You want them to know that you're looking out for their best interests, even when it's to your own short-term loss. Even if it means recommending that they go to a competitor for a specific product or service because for their specific needs, that other option might be a better fit for them today. Knowing full well that if they ever have a need for your products and services again in the future, not only are they going to come back, but they're going to have a greater respect for your brand and who you are. So that's just the tip of the iceberg with this book. This book goes into so much more. It talks about how skeptical people are today, how today more than ever before, people are very familiar with spin, political spin. They're very familiar or probably worked in a job where they've been exposed to manipulative sales techniques. And people are desperate for relationships and brands that they can actually trust, people that they can actually put their trust in. So today more than ever, not that this hasn't been true in the past, but today more than ever, people are very skeptical. And the best thing that you can do for your brand is to become an agent for the customer and serve their needs above all else. So I highly recommend that you read this book, especially after reading the other one, just to really firm that idea up. I think they pair well together. Like I say, it's important to understand the tools and concepts from a book like Influence by Robert Cialdini, and then it's also important to put them within context with a book like this. So those are 6 books that I strongly recommend you read. I'll quickly recap them here. Traction by Gabriel Weinberg and Justin Mayers, The 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing by Reis and Jack Trout, Building a StoryBrand by Donald Miller, Contagious by Jonah Berger, Influence by Dr. Robert Cialdini, and The Language of Trust by Michael Maslansky. That's it for this video. If you have any questions or if you have any requests for books to solve a specific business or marketing problem, let me know down in the comment section below. And of course, if you're interested in learning more about how to build and grow your business, then I recommend that you subscribe to the channel here on YouTube and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on future videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.